we go. Hey,
there we go. Finally,
Instagram's
the technology.
Completely foreign thing for me. So
the technology challenge was accepted, and we got through it, man. How you going?
I'm doing all right, bud. I'm doing all right. How are things down your way?
Doing not bad at all, man. Doing not bad at all. It's been quite interesting over here. The curve's kind of flattening, and things may be opening up in the next few weeks and beyond. Potentially talking about kids jumping into one classroom session per week, or at least going back for 1 day per week to begin with. So trying to get my movements out the door for at least one day. It'd be pretty good for them to get maybe out and about again, but nothing too crazy over here. Like it is slowly kind of getting better. How are you guys going?
The fortunate part, I think, for California, they're pretty aggressive with, the governor of the state's been fairly aggressive with, the different protocols they kind of put in place. I know where I live here in Southern California, they, I think it's $1,000 for a ticket for not wearing a mask.
Wow.
Where you go now, you can't even get in. There's security guards at the grocery store. If you don't have a mask, you're not allowed in. Based on, occupancy of different places. If there's too many people in a certain place, they keep you outside. The usual kind of precautions that they're encouraging here. But we're all dealing with it a little differently. I think it's kind of a rolling kind of uncharted waters for everybody. Some places I think are a little further along than others. But I mean, it's like I tell my team, we're just finding a way to grow through it. We want to be different coming out of this, and I think, the landscape's going to change. For a lot of us, the perspective on different things is going to change. So, we're really kind of pushing that initiative with our kids where, if you come out of this the exact same, you've basically lost an opportunity to grow a number of different ways, as difficult as it might be. I was listening to a webinar yesterday with Emma Hayes, and she talked about, tough times are not permanent. Tough people are, and it's resonates, I think, with, the people that I think we are and the young people that we're in charge of developing. I think that's it's kind of an important message for all of them. But I'm healthy. Haven't put on too much weight yet, so.
You're getting through a lot of push-up challenges, Everyone's posting that on social media.
Wait, he hasn't sent anything to me though, so thank goodness. That'd be trouble.
Yeah. But what you said is interesting, because it is quite an interesting period in time, period in history, and certainly the landscape. There's a lot of things happening in the States, and maybe, look, I've had a lot of questions from potential prospects over the last month or so, since things started kind of really heating up across the globe. But, there have been, questions around, what's the lay of the land now across the whole collegiate landscape. And, I've seen a few programs kind of being hit up pretty hard. Do you see that as something that's going to happen, right across the board, like from a financial perspective? There are going to be schools that are smaller that might be affected a whole lot more, and, I guess from an investment perspective, a lot of funding may be cut from programs. And then, the interesting thing that came through this week, from one of the coaching network, they thought that some of these programs that may be profoundly affected, that, really at the top of the food chain, they've kind of been looking at those programs anyway for quite some time, and kind of looked at, it's been controversial, right? Kind of looked at it and said, I think it's time, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's, I've had some friends lose programs in the last week and, established, nationally ranked, consistently turning out great people over the years. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, I think some institutions are looking at the situation like an opportunity to rectify maybe somewhere they went wrong as far as their funding, how they allocated funds within, the university. I know just from the West region for us, we've had a couple schools already closed, both private, which I think they struggle a little more with enrollment. They're a little more enrollment-driven place, for those type of schools in order to maintain the packages that they can present to student athletes in order for them to actually afford to go to those places. I know within the CCAA we're feeling we're feeling the pinch a little bit as far as state funding is allocated a number of different ways, and I'm fortunate enough to be in an institution that we're probably the top institution in this conference as far as enrollment. I mean, our enrollment will go up after this, which is scary, and a lot of our funding is based on the enrollment of the school, and the percentage of that allows us to maintain a competitive athletic department, and a little bit of I guess I wouldn't say security, but I know there's some schools in our conference that will struggle, that heavily rely on those state funds that don't attract the same number of students.
Yeah, and I. So, do you see the kind of landscape shifting across conferences where they may, in some cases, those that were probably a lot more harder hit financially or otherwise might compress and then maybe merge into maybe some of these conferences and conference play as well might, if it doesn't happen, because it's a moving target at the minute in terms of when the conference might kick off again, say for 2020, it may shift over into next year. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, we had a staff meeting this morning, and they talked, Cal State Fullerton was the first CSU to move to online instruction for the fall, which, the unfortunate part with the President Council right now within our conference, they haven't quite addressed how it's going to impact athletics yet. I think waiting to see kind of how that plays out, how the ban it gets lifted if it doesn't, and then they just haven't been able to align what the NCAA is trying to do as far as keeping people safe and finding out how in the end, if we do have a fall season, how do you maintain a level playing field for everybody that's in a different, maybe, like I said, like a rolling start for me, like New York State is in a completely different place than.
Yes.
So, I think there's a lot of moving parts right now that are not connected. For us, it's beyond our control. We give our opinions. I know budget-wise, there's a number of institutions that are canceling a lot of their travel as far as maybe non-conference play, and there's a lot of talk about just having conference play in order to kind of minimize the impact, the financial impact to some of those institutions that just are going to find themselves on the wrong end of this. So yeah, it's fluid, right? I think every day there's, I wake up and there's a new piece of information. So
it's just a really interesting shift, and the only reason I ask is that we have prospects who are kind of sitting on the fence. And this is in different parts of the world in terms of the client base that we're kind of chasing down or prospective client base, and they're basically saying, okay, hey, we're ready to go, but we just don't know what the hell's happening in the States, right? And it's hard, right? So it's hard for them to kind of make a commitment where they don't really know. But I'm positive. I think that, it's just going to be a kind of look, it will be a tidal shift. It won't be a small kind of shift. And I think, all governing bodies of collegiate sports are just going to going to have to be creative and going to have to just kind of come down and make it a little bit more palpable for, for these kids who are, either coming back or potentially wanting to join new programs, right? So it's interesting times, my man. But look, I'm really, really blessed to have you on board. One and all, we have none other than Jay Mason, the head coach of Cal Poly Pomona, NCAA Division II in the CCAA, the California Collegiate Athletic Association, probably one of the top conferences in NCAA Division II. We're going to, there's just so much information here. I literally sat down taking some notes last night, and I just went, I'm going to hit off a few key points for Coach, and Coach is going to kind of drop some pearls of wisdom for us and for our viewers. Just to give you a little bit of structure, one and all. So we're going to go through just a little bit of an overview of the program, a little bit about the conference, go through some of Coach's history, which is very, very long and tenured. Probably take 2 hours to get through a lot of this stuff, but outside of that, we're going to cover off a few key questions that I did want Coach to cover for all of us. And if you do have questions for Coach, put them in the comments section below. I'll be scrolling through as Coach enlightens us with all this information, and I'll try to pick out one or two that we can probably cover off. And look, Coach, there's an hour, a hard cut-off with Instagram. They give us an hour, so we've roughly got about 45 minutes left of this session. And if we have to, we'll jump on. We'll let it clock off, and we might jump on for a little bit longer if we need to cover off anything more. But we'll see how time goes. But I'll warn you around about that time when we're about to get cut off. So one and all, again, Mr. Jay Mason, head coach of Cal Poly Pomona. Let me go through some of the stats here. 2019 was one of those, and maybe you can enlighten me because I didn't go back year upon year, but 2019 was a 13-win, 5 draw and 3 loss season. You went all the way into the second round of the 2019 national tournament in the NCAA Division II. You lost to Point Loma, who are also part of the CCAA. They went off all the way into deeper rounds of the tournament. I think they ended up losing with Western Washington, I believe. But just to give you some background, one and all, I actually had the privilege of travelling out and meeting Jay. That was actually last year. I think it was the first time that we actually met. But my God, if you look at Coach's profile, you guys log on to the team page. It's almost like it really is a very storied career. So I'm very, very interested in uncover some of the wisdom of your journey, without doubt. But back to the CCAA, give us some thoughts on last year's season. And a lot of people want to look, it's really interesting because when I speak to a lot of prospective clients, anywhere around the world, everyone wants to kind of head to California. But, there's a reason why the conference is really tough and why the conference is so strong on a national stage. And maybe you want to give us some clarity, not only on thoughts of the season, but also why you feel the CCAA is such a strong conference. So I'll let you kick off. Give some thoughts about 2019, that 13-5-3 run, a little bit about entry into the national tournament, and also your thoughts around the conference.
Well, hey, I appreciate that intro. It's, for me, even before I was able to come out here to this conference, it was a target for me. This conference is, I believe it's the #1 conference in the country, top to bottom. And, I think as a professional coach, you want to test yourself, as you progress with or against the best programs you can play against. So, the CCA was a big draw for me, just as a coach. Obviously, Southern California has its perks, but the institution itself was attractive to me. The way they educate, polytechnic way of learning is a unique way of learning, and it ties well into what I do every day as a coach. Last year was, I think you take over a program and you have your principles and you have your ideas, and I think I speak for a lot of coaches. We believe we can be effective maybe a little quicker than it actually takes. I think, the growth happens in different pockets of your program. And sometimes it may not reflect what you want it to reflect, but 2019 was the first season we had all of our players. It was every one of my recruits, and our culture was finally at a stage where I felt that it kind of took care of itself, and I think that kind of confidence grew throughout the season. And I think for us, it was, I think confidence is a big thing in anything we do, and I think the girls were able to, not only through how hard they work every single day, but, they're able to just take the information we provide for them and apply it. And I think as a coach, that's all you can ask. Whether it works or not, they're taking that information. So extremely proud of the group. I think we came up a little short in the national tournament. We're physically, we played in our last 4 games of the season. Every team was in the top 15 in the country, and I think we just had some had some depth issues towards the end of the season that caught up with us. And Point Loma, Christy does a fantastic job there. It's a great school. And their conference, she's actually in the Pac West Conference. There's 3 good teams in the conference, so it's a little different physically for them. Great program, and it was, we play every year, against that group. So, we're looking forward to playing them in 2020 if all of this works out. So, the conference itself, it's, I always talk to recruits and tell them, think about the most emotionally, physically draining opponent you play against. Do that twice every weekend of the season. So, we want players that want that. We want players that want to have that challenge and want to be an impact in an environment like that. So, as a coach, do I have a few more gray hairs than I did when I got here? Absolutely. But it's worth it. It's worth it.
I see it as, I always tell these kids that it's a smaller window of opportunity. Here's the interesting thing that I've always seen across Californian teams in general, and this is something that I tell our recruits and also and their families, and then outside of it, any prospective recruit, that everyone wants to kind of get over to California, but it is a small window, because what you find in the Californian region is that you have such a strong, I call it football, soccer culture, right from top to toe. And a lot of programs have the ability to recruit out their backyard. And so it becomes difficult. And then you add on the layers as well, where I think some of the schools across the Cal State system had implemented a policy where they were probably shifting towards providing scholarship, not just off the back of, this international student is a world-class student, athlete. We want these students to be, world-class students as well. And so for some, from what I understand, some of these institutions have cut down, the athletic kind of piece in terms of the scholarship that's divvied up. So it can get, I don't see too many international students for the most part across the CCAA. You find them in pockets, but then you just see that most of the kids across rosters have been recruited out of the Californian region. Do you want to talk to that a little bit? Since you're recruiting.
And being an international student athlete myself, I think it's something that there are massive benefits to having someone from a different part of the world. And ultimately for us here, even a different part of the country. California is a very different place. Each state has its unique kind of feel and culture to it. So I think for us, I know you see more of the internationals on the men's side. I think that is something where, for example, at our institution, we're fortunate enough to have an international waiver that we can apply for that essentially gives those student athletes in-state tuition, and then we work with the funds that we have. I think, in regards to our program, a fully funded Division II program is 9.9 scholarships, and we have a little over 5. So, for us, we have to be creative, as you said earlier, as far as like stretching our dollars in a way that we can create, a group of young women that are able to succeed in the classroom and on the field. So, on the female side, there's like you said, there's pockets, there's sprinkles of internationals. I know for us as a program, it's a goal of ours to kind of, I guess, add that to the diversity of our program, is to be able to add some of those international athletes. And, I was fortunate enough to be at St. Ed's with the Oracle, Nick.
Yes, sir.
We were fortunate enough at that school that, we had a little more freedom, and we had the ability to bring in some amazing student athletes from all over the world, and to see how it reflects on the rest of the team, because it's new ideas, new perspectives. People look at life in completely different ways, and when you're able to integrate those pieces, I think you have a more well-rounded group, a more understanding of how the world really works.
Yeah, I think I've had the privilege, of being, across some pretty impressive environments, and obviously, meeting Mr. Cowell. We'll get to him in a minute, but I think, you hit the nail on the head. I think there's a lot of different dynamics that go into the whole Californian region that make it appealing, for a prospective student athlete. But it's really a case-by-case basis. I always tell these kids and these families that, if you can land an opportunity in the Californian school, then as an international student, you're in a pretty sweet spot, because it's an extremely competitive environment. So, there's an interesting thing about yourself in terms of, your background. I could go through, like I said, probably about 2 pages of different stats and otherwise, but there's an interesting background here with yourself in terms of the fact that, yes, you were an international student athlete. You spent a lot of time in, the assistant and then kind of the associate head coaching roles across so many different programs. I'll drop off a few bits of information here. We just start at the beginning, and we want everyone to kind of get to know Jay a little.
Yeah.
We're going really, really deep into your past, right? So I'll cap off a few kind of key points here, and then you can just go from where to go, talk right through kind of your experience. But there's a few bits and pieces here that are really interesting, and then seeing your progression as a coach and now where you've ended up, it's really telling. So everything from, being growing up in Canada, get to know that a little bit more, because that's a really interesting footballing or soccer environment unto itself.
It's different.
It is. And then your time as a player and as a coach immediately. Interestingly enough, and maybe it slipped my mind when I met you, but you were a competitive goalkeeper. Obviously, I was a competitive goalkeeper as well, and I think that
All competitive, right?
you'd be interested in getting your thoughts around, that position and how you recruit for that, because we do have some people that were jumping on board today that wanted to get more clarity around that. But you're a goalkeeper trainer across, and obviously an assistant coach across not only the collegiate market but also the semi-pro market. So we'll get you to uncover a little bit around that. But also, I think something that was really, really important for your growth and development as a person and as a coach was your time at St. Edward's with Nick Cowell. And, obviously, like you said, the Oracle, he comes from a lineage of coaches who have proliferated the whole collegiate landscape and just peppered it with some special teams, historic moments, and have developed coaches like yourself under their wings. So I'm going to get you to cover definitely that time there. And I'll just cap it off. I mean, at St. Ed's, it was 10 years, a decade, 6 conference championships, 9 NCAA Division II tournament appearances. Ridiculous. Like it was it seemed like a very, very special. I was very fortunate to get out of St. Ed's. We obviously had a few of our recruits joining. One of them joining, or should have been joining this upcoming season. And then we also have one of our recruits who's been there for a few years now. So it's a very special place and a very special program that I want you to kind of dig into. But yeah, everything from where to go. Let's uncover this Pandora's box of information with none other than Jay Mason. If you just jumped on board, we've got Coach Jay Mason, head women's soccer coach for Poly Pomona in the CCAA California Collegiate Athletic Association, one of the top conferences in the US, women's conferences in the US. We've already just uncovered a whole heap of information. The coach is going to uncover his background, and I'll let you kick it off.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been really fortunate. My family, we've traveled the world a little bit. So, born in Germany, lived in Greece for a little while, and then spent most of my childhood in Canada. So, as you said, it's a little different soccer landscape up there. I mean, I grew up playing more hockey than I did soccer. Soccer was, I think I was 11 years old when I started playing, and it was at a boys and girls club with a bunch of Italian guys that, my parents weren't able to pick me up after school, so I'd walk across the street, and I befriended these Italian boys, and we played. And that was the first team I was able to, one of the Italian dads asked my dad, does he play? I was like, no, it's just hanging out. So that's how my soccer career started.
With a bunch of Italians, mate. And then you became a goalkeeper, right? And so I'm assuming that Italians, crazy Italians, and some goalkeeping in the mix. Amazing. That's good. What a combination.
And I was fortunate. I think where I was, soccer was growing. It was really starting to grow in the country, and it was a time where the clubs were ethnically kind of separated. You either played, our club was Juventus, and we were an Italian club. You had Celtic, a Scottish club, and you had Toronto Supra, the Portuguese club. So it was broken up a little bit that way. And the coach that found me his name is Bob Graham, and he runs the WinStar Academy in Toronto now. And they had the number 1 club team in the country. And it was one of those, I played for a smaller club, and we were playing against, I don't know if you remember Dwayne De Rosario. He was a MLS player, and he was a year older than me, but we were playing against him. And, you have one of those games where you kind of play out of your skin, and I had one of those. And fortunately enough, the national team was there and watching Dwayne. So it was kind of Dwayne who got me involved with the national program, oddly enough. And then from there, I was fortunate to work with like Hector Marinaro Sr. and, guys like Dino Perry. And I was fortunate as a young player to be around guys who were former professionals. So I was able to play I think you'd understand this. Maybe a little more beyond your years as far as maturity goes in that position, which I think carries a lot of weight when you're a goalkeeper. So, I was very fortunate that way. You want me to touch on coaching now?
Yeah, I think like if you talk about that, it's interesting that you mentioned the whole dynamic in Canada. It's almost a sister in some aspects in terms of the way that it's structured and the way, as a country, the way that it's run or otherwise, for the most part, it runs almost parallel with the system here in Australia. So it's very, very, very interesting that you mention, the whole dynamic of you growing up in an environment that was, clubs were very ethnically based. So just to give you clarity on my end, I grew up playing in the National Soccer League here in Australia, and I played for a Croatian-based club. That was my background and heritage. That's where my family came from. And then and I played for an Italian-based club as well. And we played against the likes of Sydney Olympic, which was Greek, and then you played against Apia, which was Italian, and and so it's such an interesting dynamic. But yet, from what I understand of the Canadian market, and over the years, we've been doing this now for 10 years, and I've had the opportunity in international markets to send kids over into the Canadian market, and the Canadian market as a whole, professionally or even on the collegiate side, it's an interesting market because, there's some really fantastic Canadian colleges. Some of them proliferate back into the NCAA, like your Simon Frasers, for example. Mm-hmm. But right across the board, they have a very strong football culture. And it's interesting, even on the women's side, there are some Canadian coaches right across the US landscape, across governing bodies, and some of the ones that I've interacted with have similar backgrounds, played at a kind of a national team level for Canada, but then also recruit heavily out of Canada as well, because that's what they know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you touch on that, man. For me, it can, for the most part, those kinds of environments, especially when it's, we have that debate here locally because we have the A-League, and then basically from our perspective, you cut off a lot of those kind of ethnic-based clubs, and those ethnic-based clubs were powerhouses and generated so many, fantastic players that played for Australia or went over to play in Europe in the top leagues around the world. It kind of became second rank, so a lot of those became like what we call National Premier League 1, right? So it's almost Division 2. And it's always been an ongoing debate how that kind of ties back into the lay of the land, and is it going to be an official Division 2, and will there be relegation and promotion across the A-League and the Premier Leagues? But Canada is such an interesting place, and I think that there's high quality football that's developed there, and there's good infrastructure, and a lot of kids don't even realise that there are fantastic universities over there as well to be recruited into. Mm-hmm. Right across the board, whether it be the Simon Frasers, that's one example, but Canadian teams, and I think it's U Sports is the top tier, say, kind of the equivalent of NCAA Division 1, top flight Division 2.
It's the OUAA.
Yeah.
As far as that's the Ontario one, but yeah, it's I know Nick brought down University of Manitoba one spring season, and that's solid players. And I think people don't realize there's very few universities in Canada. It's not like the United States where you have, we have over 1,400 women's soccer programs in this country. So Canada, it's a very, very small market, and they have some fantastic teams up there. The infrastructure has improved. I started off playing it was called the Canadian Professional Soccer League, and I was 16 years old. Don't tell the NCAA. And that league it's kind of blossomed into CSL now, but you know, it's the clubs are still ethnically based. You know, they have their clubs, and I enjoyed the sense of community you would feel within those clubs where, you know, and I'm in Southern California, which is probably the most competitive soccer market in the country. The talent is off the charts. And people are grabbing players, stealing players. Kids aren't happy, moving clubs. Like for me, the best part of coaching is being a part of a group. And when you have those constant fluctuations within a team, which some of them are natural, it's kind of natural attrition sometimes with ability, talent level. But that's what I love about being a college coach. That's what I loved as a player was learning. You know, I know like playing with Vernon Town Club, they went about it completely different than the English club I played for. And I relish that. I really, and I think, you know, international athletes coming into the U.S., they can bring those unique experiences that are very different than the experiences our young players get here.
You're spot on. And you know, I'm glad that you covered that off because it resonates, and there's, I guess, a lot of synergy between the Canadian market and what still is today, again, prevalent in the Australian market with the cultural aspects of the game and how that, you know, that sense of community, like what you mentioned, really allowed for, you know, players to be developed in these little bubbles. Like everyone had their own style and way of doing it, but, you know, all those people, and myself included, that came through those kinds of systems became much stronger players, probably more emphatic, and probably a little bit more aware of, you know, different cultures and how they integrate, right? So, you know, it's a really, really interesting thing that you touched on. So I'm glad that you did. One and all, we have none other than Jay Mason, the head women's soccer coach of nationally ranked NCAA Division II Cal Poly Pomona. We've covered off a whole bunch of different information here, and we've got so much more to cover as well. So this might run off into just another segue post the hour cut off with Instagram. Coach, we got you know, a whole bunch of our viewers on here, and they're going to be able to leave a few comments there, and hopefully we can, you know, take some of their kind of questions that they have. But there was something that Pete Nowakowski had put on as a comment, just as a side comment, and he mentioned just on that point that we were talking about with community and ethnic-based clubs and otherwise, but the sense of the community is at the core heart of the club identity. So build it and they will come, and they will learn together to be successful together. And that's a really, really telling comment. Thanks for that, Pete, because Pete's an amazing young coach himself. So he's helped us with a lot of quality recruits without doubt, Coach. So that's a good comment there. So anyway, we were covering off. I think the next part that I really wanted to get clarity around was then your transition from Canada as a player into the collegiate market, some of the schools that you represented at a collegiate level, and then also how that tied into, at some point, you know, or transcended into your coaching. A little bit about your tenure within the semi-pro/pro ranks as a player and as a coach as well. And then talking about, we'll get into this amazing 10 years that you had at St. Ed's with Nick. So maybe you want to talk about now jumping over the pond from Canada into the US market as a student athlete, and then just work our way through, you know, some of that information and some of your experiences with that transition.
Yeah, it was, you know, it's a long time ago for me. You know, I'm on the older side of things now, but, you know, there wasn't a lot of information as far as for Canadian student athletes about the U.S. market. Fortunately enough, like Bob Grant has been sending players for years, and he was able to be able to get us in front of a lot of different college coaches. And I was fortunate enough to I landed at College of Charleston with Ralph Lundy, who, you know, as far as college soccer goes, is sort of a legend as far as you know, what he's accomplished in the sport, the community he's grown, not just in South Carolina, but, you know, as far as the Southeast. He's one of those guys who's kind of an unforgettable personality. Former Marine, you know, I learned a lot from him as a young player, moving away from home about, you know, the things that are important, and, you know, the principles and the values you live your life by. He was a great mentor that way. You know, I played 2 years there, and we were fortunate enough. We had a young man on our team, Stephen Williamson. His father worked for Wrexham FC in England, and Stephen was part of the U.S. national team setup. And, you know, ultimately my goal was to play soccer. It wasn't to go to school. School was something that was just part of the package. So I was fortunate enough. I don't know how I did this. I talked my parents into giving me a year, and I went to England. And, you know, I was able to, I played with 2 different clubs there, Macclesfield Town and then Stockport County, as a 19-year-old. And, you know, it was, I think for developing a young man, it helped me leaps and bounds. I think being away from home and within a culture that loved the sport and played it with such passion was very different from a lot of my experiences to that point, as far as the level of passion and energy that they
absolutely.
But it taught me a lot about myself, and, you know, I had a Dibble roommate for a couple of weeks, the famous Liverpool goalkeeper, which was an eye opener for me. You know, I was able to learn a lot about just the game in general and how much goes into it. You know, where, you know, coming from a culture in Canada where we had talented people, but there wasn't the years and years of structure that the English football brought, at least for me as a player, which I think later on down the line, it kind of structured my goalkeeper training. You know, a lot of the things I built my goalkeeper training around was, you know, fundamental English style of goalkeeping, which is completely different from the North American style, the South American style. So, you know, if you talk to my goalkeepers right now, and it's forced this year, we had a goalkeeper trainer in 2018, and she traveled a lot, missed her family, and she had to make a transition. It's like a decision, basically. And said, you know what? Keepers are coming with me for before training, and I just missed it. I missed having that. But they would say, like, yeah, it's so simple. Like, yeah, I mean,
just on that point, like, and here's something that we didn't know, right? And you don't mention that, but that experience that you had moving as a young Canadian player and then over into England, and, you know, they're Macclesfield and whatnot, they're pretty historic clubs. I mean, most of the clubs across England are historic. Resonates with me when you start talking about the goalkeeping side of things. Again, we had a few goalkeepers that joined and jumped on board, I can just see. And a lot of these kids are kind of like, well, hold on a second, how does that translate? You know, I want to go to England, or I want to go and train and play in that, you know, kind of European region. You know, how will that translate into the collegiate game? If I do look into that, is the collegiate game, from a goalkeeping perspective at least, that, you know, is it a good level? Is it going to be competitive for me? But it's interesting that you say that, because I had similar experiences. At 15, whilst I was still playing at elite level, I was here in Australia. I went to Croatia. I went to Dinamo Zagreb. Trained under some amazing goalkeeper coaches and trainers. Still remember Fadia Dalbegovic, who was an amazing goalkeeper and goalkeeper coach. He spent time at Southampton as a professional player. And he was the director of goalkeeping at Dinamo, and just a massive eye-opener, because I always saw these kids 5'4", I was the bee's knees over here as a young goalkeeper in Australia. It totally broke me down when I was over there, right? Because it was just a different level. And then later on down the line, I spent time in England. I spent time at clubs like Bury, training there, and then spent time in the conference at Southern United and clubs like that. And it's just it does help you grow. Like those experiences certainly help you grow. So I tell our clients that you've got a bit of a window. You're an elite kind of player, but you want to experience this whole European vibe or whatever it might be. Go do it. But realistically, the window of opportunity for you to break into a club over there at that level is very, very small. But I'm also seeing that crossover into the collegiate game. Right? So take the experience that you get from that. But if you're more leaning towards getting your degree and getting an education, then those experiences will translate very, very well back into the collegiate game. And like you said, the collegiate game has become, and from what I have seen over the last decade, it really has become almost a global game unto itself in a bubble, because you've got so many foreign coaches coming in, you've got so many foreign players coming in. Go back to, and we'll just jump into that in a moment, when I was being recruited by the Incarnate Word, back when it was a D2 school under Courier, it's a very, very different world, like compared to what it is today. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, and sorry I cut you off there, Coach, but, how's that transition back into from having those experiences at a kind of pro level in the UK and then transitioning back into the collegiate market as a player, and how that impacted you in terms of your growth as a player or otherwise, and where you played, obviously, and what level?
Yeah, obviously it restricted me a bit. I couldn't play Division I soccer anymore, and I was fortunate enough that the coach at St. Louis, his good friend, had taken over at UAW, and when I got there, it was I want to say we had 18 foreigners on that team from all over the world, and it was the best collegiate team I've ever played for in my life. Dennis Courier, who's doing his thing at the University of Dayton. I mean, he's an exceptional recruiter. He knows how to find the pieces and put those pieces in the right places. So I was fortunate to be in a place where we were all in a similar boat. And I think the experiences you have, and I'm sure you can attest to this, I think when you have those experiences with professional clubs, great goalkeeper trainers, Malcolm Webster, Fred Barber were two guys that worked in England, and for them to sit down with me, and in 19 you think you're pretty good, and he's like, look, you're fundamentally not good. You're an athlete, and I was like, okay. And for me, it was the little details that they were able to show me, and the simplicity of how to train the habitual movements of how to be successful as a goalkeeper, and then the mentality of it. I mean, when you train with people that love the game the way they love the game, the intensity you go about things changes. So I think the transition back into college with foreign players was better if I went to a school that was maybe all North American players. It might have been a little more challenging for me as far as relating to those groups. But, UAW set me up. There was a team that folded. The Austin Posse was this team they put together. And, I want to say it lasted maybe 6 months. But I was able to play with guys like Ezra Hendrickson and Chad Deering and Roy Lassiter and, guys that I watched on TV, or men's national team players. And
Roy Lassiter and others, I mean, they were just great players, man. That's an amazing experience.
But I think it's the details of the game that, as a college coach, we recruit these kids, and we have so many great clubs here and great club coaches that do a great job at developing the players. And then I think it's up to us, obviously, to find the right pieces. But those little details of those experiences, I think, go a long way with those players, because a lot of them haven't been in an environment where they are even asked to think about those things.
Correct.
I think it gives us a little bit of an advantage, and I have a great staff. And Dan Richards, coming from England, he's had a lot of similar experiences that I've had, and then obviously with Katie Smith, she's a Pac-12 player and played professionally in Europe for 5 years. So
yeah.
I think it's the little details within the game that give the kids, when they see it works, or they're like, they start looking at the game a little differently. And now, if we can raise their soccer IQ a little bit, confidence raises a little bit. And now the discussions you have with these players are completely different than they were 4 months ago. And it just becomes such a soccer-rich environment where you're actually just talking about the game, which is exciting for me that we're getting to that point with our group. But yeah, I mean, it's I've been fortunate with a lot of the coaches that I've come across. When I was at UIW transitioning into coaching, Tina Patterson, who played for Anson Dorrance, she had a unique experience, there, and John Smith, who was at Stanford, for a while, winning all those national championships. Matt O'Sullivan, who's now the men's coach with me at Cal Poly Pomona, who I think he's one of the best coaches I see in the college game right now. He's unbelievable. And just coming out here, I mean, Yossi Raz, I can't go too far without
the legend.
And it's just another level, right? And it's been fortunate to be around those environments.
You do have such a hub. It really is that was the experience that I got from traveling out last year and just visiting campuses and meeting yourselves and meeting all the coaches. You all know one another, and you all kind of. It's interesting, as much as you compete, you all work together as well, and I think that's what makes CCAA such a special conference, right? In essence, that you have such an amazing array of top quality coaches. So, Coach, I'm going to let you know, and we're going to take a bit of a break in between. We've got around about 4 minutes, and we're going to take a few minutes of a break, and then we're going to jump back on because you'll probably shut us off for the next few minutes or so, because we've got still a whole bunch more to cover, and I hope we're not taking too much of your time up. But this is amazing. The amount of information. So, one and all, if you just joined, we've been joined by Jay Mason, none other than the head women's soccer coach for nationally ranked powerhouse school, Cal Poly Pomona, in NCAA Division II. Just a wealth of information from a standout person and coach. We've only just begun. We've covered off a few bits and pieces of coach's history, a little bit about the conference and the strength of the CCAA, and we've got a whole lot more to cover. What we might do in the meantime is just take a little bit of a break. We'll be back in around about 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to jump on for another however long it takes us to uncover even more information, Coach. But so, one and all, we're going to jump off just for a few minutes, and then I'll announce us going back live with Coach Jay Mason here in a few minutes' time. So, how are you, Coach? I was just talking to the rest of the clan all around the world, but I hope you one and all for joining us again. This is part 2 of our interview with none other than Coach Jay Mason, the head coach of nationally ranked soccer powerhouse NCAA Division II, Cal Poly Pomona. We spent an hour uncovering some amazing bits of information. We only kind of scratched the surface. So what we did cover in the first hour was a little bit more about Coach's background, his experience around, a very strong season in 2019 in the very, very competitive CCAA conference. Talked about the strength of the conference or otherwise. We've uncovered some of the Coach's background in terms of, being born and raised in Canada, the Canadian soccer market, his transition into higher levels of play in both Canada, and then transitioning over into over into the UK as a young competitive goalkeeper himself and experiencing all of that. And then we were kind of leading off the fact that you had so many great positive influences. You mentioned coaches like Coach Dennis Currier, who was, funnily enough, the coach who recruited me for Incarnate Word back in the day. You talked about the Incarnate Word, especially that team. Talked about, and I think that's where we were roughly kind of left it off, right? But I think there were a few other things that we want to kind of talk about around maybe the Incarnate Word, maybe about the University of Charleston, your experiences there, and I want to cover off the pro game, your experience in the pro game. Then we'll talk about your time at St. Edward's under Nick Cowell, and then we're going to cover off a few key questions that I want to cover off for all of our viewers from all around the world. So welcome back, Coach, and round two again. Hey, we've covered off a lot of good information, and so let's kick off again from, I think we're leading off from the University of Incarnate Word and your time there, and then obviously moving on from that.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, we were a group of guys, bunch of foreigners on that team. It's oddly enough, we have a group chat on WhatsApp that since this entire pandemic has started, we've been able to kind of reconnect, which has been nice to go back to some ways. Dennis Courier's on there chiming in once in a while, so it's nice to kind of have him on there. I mean, that group was a special group. I want to say 7 of us ended up playing professional soccer off that group, and all over the world. And I mean, again, just talking about the different experiences, and I think we got into the details of those experiences that don't necessarily happen to a lot of our young players here, that we were able to kind of take advantage of as far as spending time with each other. So moving from the coaching influence that I had there, and I think I failed to mention Mike Jeffries was there as well, and I was able to work under him and John Smith, and you have an opportunity to work under an MLS Coach of the Year, a Herman Trophy winner, a national champion. It's and you look at a player like John Smith, who's the first international player drafted in the MLS. Like, I was extremely blessed to have the people around me to help kind of just point me in the right direction. Because as a coach, I think I'm going to retract that. As a player, we think we understand the game and how it works because we're good at it. It doesn't necessarily translate into having to articulate that to people that see the game in 27, 28 different ways. So I was very fortunate with the mentors that I did have there at UIW. And it led me to Nick Cowell, and I think I was fortunate. I had a relationship with Paul McGinley at Trinity University through club soccer, which is ultimately where I was able to do a lot of my goalkeeper training. And and indirectly, I was able to meet Lance Key, who's one of my best friends. Those people that that forces you to aspire to something better every single day you get out of bed, and those are the type of people I want to be around. Those are the type of student athletes I want to be around, and Nick was exactly the same. I mean, he's one of those people that he's had the experience of coaching at every single division in this country. He understands the challenges that come along with each of those positions. And I mean, he's been at a top Division III team, a Power 5 Big 12 team, to a powerhouse Division II program. And, it's a funny story. When I met Nick, I was coaching at a Texas State camp, and I was training the goalkeepers, and I had never met Nick before. And he walked over and he said, "Don't you think you're working them a bit too hard?" And I looked, Dylan Harrison, who was introducing him to me, I looked at him, who is this guy? I'm like, no, they're fine. it's okay. And then, a couple months later, he called me. He's like, look, I'd love to have you as my assistant. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, that transition at St. Ed's was, Nick went in there and basically flipped the culture and got them to believe in a system that worked. And I think for us, we were able to do that fairly quickly, which allowed us to gain some momentum recruiting-wise. We were able to attract better players. Because, the funny part was we took that team, and I remember I was at a club game talking to it was one of the other club coaches, and they're like, St. Ed's, like, where is that? I'm like, it's right here in Austin. Like, it blew my mind basically where the program was in the club scene. So, and Nick taught me a lot about, I think he's one of the most methodical coaches that you will come across as far as how he prepares, how he drills his teams. He minimizes the mistakes that he minimizes, in the way he sets his groups up was something that, coming from a guy who had played with teams that took a lot of risk. And as a goalkeeper, when you play for teams that take a lot of risk, you tend to take the brunt of the transitional moments. So it was good for me to see basically how to structure and build a program. And he gave me a lot of responsibility. And he reminded me, he said, look, if you want to be a head coach, you need to know how to do everything, every little thing. You're by yourself. And he's like, I'm going to give you every responsibility possible. So when you're ready, when you make that jump, that you're ready for it. So I can't thank him enough for what he's given to me as a friend, a mentor. We were like an old couple by the end of it. We knew each other's little idiosyncrasies. We knew when not to talk. We knew when to talk. And I miss that, to be honest. It's I miss the relationship of being in the room and on the sideline, and he was a big factor in my not taking jobs. As far as early, we were successful. I had a lot of great offers from different programs, and he was able to clarify and sift through the excitement or the emotion of the offers to look at what might be best for me. And when that did come up, he was probably my biggest advocate when I was like, look, I want to take a run at this job. And he's like, I will do everything possible to make sure that you at least have an opportunity to have it. So, he, like I said, I can't thank the man enough. He was definitely a massive influence.
Yeah, I think I cut you off. I think we got cut off just for a second. I think I got you back now. But yeah, look, I had the honour and the privilege, I guess, of travelling up to a program like St. Ed's and sitting down with Nick, and can't recall, he shouted me something in the cafeteria. It was some kind of Mexican movie.
Yeah, probably.
And we just sat around. Yeah, we sat around talking about football and whatnot, but really, one and all, again, we're just joined by Jay Mason. This is the second part of an amazing interview, and just a note for one and all who are joining. The live feeds are up for 24 hours, and once they are off, we actually put them onto our Patreon channel, and on Patreon you can actually subscribe for a little small fee and get the full interview with Coach Mason and many other coaches that we have been interviewing on a weekly basis here every Thursday, 8 a.m. in Australian Eastern Standard Time. So covered off so much amazing detailed information today, and still so much more to uncover in this next hour with Coach Mason. But it's really telling that you mentioned that relationship that you had with such a strong mentor, but I mean, you had such a platform of mentors growing up that it built into this relationship, with Nick. And it's so interesting that you mentioned almost the whole Texas soccer scene. So whether it be Paul McGinley, who we've had the privilege of working for, actually our very initial clients from way back in time, graduated, obviously attended Trinity University, so Paul's the godfather, and what we call Nick again?
The Oracle.
The Oracle.
The Oracle.
They both, kind of grew up together in the collegiate game, and obviously very close friends or otherwise. But then you mentioned a few other people, obviously Lansky, who is the current coach on the women's side for Louisiana Lafayette. Spent time with for a whole week. Funnily enough, he was hanging out with me and the family over here.
For a visit, yeah.
Yeah, in January, and just an amazing individual as well as a coach and just as a human being. And you mentioned, who did you mention as well? We recruited for him as well. Dylan, who was the head coach at Nicholls State University, NCAA Division I, before he transitioned back to Trinity. But we had one of our phenomenal women recruits, Christy Holmes, played under Dylan, and it's just such a hub of amazing people in and around Texas, and then it almost forms a platform if you're lucky enough to come under coaches that you had come up under in that region, and it's almost like this sounding board for a career for many of you young coaches. So it's phenomenal that you kind of capped off that. And just so you understand one and all, when Coach Mason was at St. Edward's University, NCAA Division II, it is what I'd consider on the women's front a powerhouse, women and men's. Unfortunately for the men's team, we just heard news that they're playing that program. But on the women's side, it's been a perennial kind of powerhouse under Nick himself and otherwise for 7 years. So they, in those 10 years, there were 6 conference championships, 9 NCAA Division II tournament appearances, so in the rounds or otherwise. And, it's just an amazing background and an amazing kind of, bubble to be in. In and around that whole Texas family, if you call it that, at a collegiate level or otherwise. Now, interestingly enough, Coach, you spent time, not only yourself as a player and professional on the professional side, but you spent time in the pro game, and this will bridge into some of the key questions that we wanted to uncover, but spent time at the Austin Capitals as a goalkeeper trainer. There were a few other clubs that you kind of worked alongside. You were actually one of the founding members of the Classic Elite Soccer Club as well.
Pomona, Dennis Courier.
With Mr. Dennis Courier. So you want to talk about some of those experiences at a pro level? And then that will probably bridge into that first question that I had for all of our viewers was, is there a pathway to the pro for the pro collegiate bound female student athlete, and what does that pathway look like in the USA? Because obviously the women's game has grown on a global scale. So maybe you want to cap off. Okay, so your time in the pro ranks as a coach, and now what you see at being a head coach in nationally ranked, college soccer program, female college soccer program. What's that landscape kind of looking like for your student athletes, and do they actually have a platform and a pathway to go into the pro ranks on the women's front in the USA?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. I think I first became introduced to the female transition from collegiate soccer to professional soccer was through Nick Cowell. And we were able to place a number of our student athletes in Sweden, England, places that he's obviously very familiar with and has relationships within, that just allowed those young ladies that just weren't done playing, that had the ability and wanted to continue to explore the different options as professional athletes. And I know, and I'm not sure if you've spoken to Nick about Stacey Copeland. I'm sure she's come up once or twice, but she's an England international soccer player. She's the Commonwealth World Championship boxer. I mean, I don't know how many TED Talks she's done now, as far as empowering women in sports and paving the way for female sports. And Stacey, I had Stacey speak to my team during preseason, and she's such a character, just full of energy and life. And she was one of those people that, if you looked at what was stacked against her, or what her fears or apprehensions might have been, nothing ever stood in her way in pursuing what she wanted to do. And it resonated with our group. And, since then we've had a couple of players here at Pomona that have expressed interest. Just after this season, we had 4 girls come in and say, look, I want to try to keep playing. And you're spot on. I mean, the women's game's growing all over the world. And the opportunity for females to continue to play is it's in a great spot right now. I think in the U.S., the NWSL, it's your top players. Most of those players come from the high-end Power 5, Division 1 colleges and universities. So it's not impossible. There's a lot of combines and professional events that they put on. I know here in SoCal for different teams. The USL, I heard, is putting together a potential rival female league in 2021, which
that's massive. Yeah,
I think it's an exciting. It's just an exciting time because there are a lot of players on the fringe, and you speak to someone like Lance Key, who he played at one of the top universities in the country, for Trinity University, at a Division III level, and he was drafted to the MLS. And I mean, I think that the more pathways we have for these female athletes to explore those options within our country, I think we'll see a shift a little bit in the culture of the game for them, and the drive that they see there is potential to potentially make a living. And the women's soccer team, the U.S. national team, is doing a fantastic job of pushing forward, the equal pay, the equal opportunities for these young players, because they put the work in. They put the work in, and I think we're all in the belief that there should be more opportunities for them to continue to play. So it's exciting. I mean, I really hope. I don't know how the pandemic will affect the USL pushing that forward, but I think with the DA dissolving, it may push teams and maybe some funding into different areas, which it could be a platform for a lot of players from all divisions, just to have a place to play.
Yeah, I see that, and I was very privy to it last year when I was a sponsor for LA Salsa down in Long Beach, and we had one of your girls over playing with the club, and obviously they've changed names and otherwise in the interim, but it really does resonate with me for the fact that most of our elite clientele with the company have been standout Division 1 type players, played in some of the Power 5s. I played at some of the nationally, higher ranked, nationally ranked D2 conferences and programs, and had phenomenal careers. But fair enough. Some of these girls are saying, "Hey, I want to continue my study," and that's an amazing thing, and that's the whole reason why the whole college landscape is so special. But at the same time, too, I see it on the men's side. I'm able to tap into the summer leagues for these kids to continue to grow and play. And the funny thing about it is that I have a lot of these guys are now getting opportunities at a pro level as well to train and trial and otherwise. So I'm really, really hoping that we're able to enact that for our female student athletes, that I can have that kind of conversation with them and basically say, hey, look, there is a route for you if you want to play professionally as a female in the US leagues, because a lot of girls that, look, I still run another training organisation, and I've been running that for 15 years here locally in Sydney, and I train a lot of elite young female players, predominantly goalkeepers, and a lot of them say, well, I want to give it a go over in Europe now, because that's growing, especially in the women's kind of equivalent of the English Premier League. And then, it'd be amazing for them to say, hey, hold on a second, look, you're going over to the collegiate market in the US, there's still a platform for you to continue to grow and play. We do have the NWSL, like you mentioned. There are some of those semi-pro leagues like the WPSL. I would say that most of our clients and any of the girls watching this who have just joined us with Jay Mason, who's the head coach of Cal Poly Pomona in NCAA Division 2, you take the opportunity to really look at those platforms, meaning that if you're looking at studying and playing in the US, you also have a great opportunity to potentially play in the semi-pro ranks during the summer months, just like our male athletes.
Yep.
And then, there is an opportunity for you to potentially play at a professional level at some point, so it's interesting that you did uncover that. So you feel that there is an opportunity now over the next 4 months and beyond, obviously give or take with the corona pandemic or otherwise, that there's going to be a more of an opportunity for these girls to continue to kind of grow and evolve?
Yeah, when we sat down as a staff, and Katie Smith, my assistant, played in the Bundesliga, she played in Iceland, she played in France, we have, she has tons of contacts there. Obviously with St. Ed's, there's contacts that we were able to make with different people in Europe, but we wanted to see, is there any movement, and I started doing more research, and I found that to start a league in 2021 that would kind of rival the NWSL, and possibly it could become a feeder league. You never know kind of how those things pan out, but similar to MLS USL structure now, maybe promotion relegation. I think there's a lot of things up in the air right now with everything that's going on. So, I think it's exciting for our players. I know it's fun to see them love the game that much that they want to continue to play it at a high level. It's, in the past, it's always been, well, my 4 years is up and I'm done. And there weren't a lot of opportunities for these young women. So, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that it continues. The WPSL is great in the summer. I think a lot of the college players do that to stay in shape. And but again, the structure of it is some do a fantastic job and some train once a week and then you're in a game. So I think there's benefits and there's risks that the players take in being a part of those situations. But ultimately, I'm hopeful that the USL is able to put it together and to have more opportunities for them.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic thing, and I saw the kind of strength of it when I was over in LA. That was just to me, it was inspirational because I could see that there are these pathways, and obviously, like you said, it's give or take. Some just don't have the infrastructure as others, and just like just so you understand, we run another service in tangent for the kids that come through our pathway to be able to connect the dots. So we're always on the lookout for really good quality summer teams where the girls can train continually throughout the week rather than just one and done and that's it per week. league. So that's a bridge into a potential professional player at some point. So hopefully the USL does come to fruition with that league for women, because it will really impact their growth and development without doubt. I think there were a few other questions that we wanted to cover off, and then we'll see whether or not any of the viewers had any further questions. But a lot of our clients, they look at the whole collegiate landscape. Some are pretty well informed because they do some research prior, and obviously we empower them with a lot of information. Some of the prospects who are coming in for the first time really don't understand the lay of the land collegiately on the women's side. So maybe you want to talk more about, your conference. I mean, we covered at the start of the dialogue. Maybe you want to delve into that a little bit, how that fares across the landscape in Division 2, and how does it marry up between, the top flight of Division 2 and the top flight of Division 1, and is there parity, or is it a white gulf between those? So maybe you want to cover off again, the strength of your conference, what are some of the top conferences in NCAA Division 2, and then obviously how that marries up with against Division 1 programs as well, because I think a lot of the girls who have joined us today, and again, thanks one and all for jumping on board this live and exclusive interview with Coach Jay Mason of Pomona NCAA Division 2. So maybe you want to cover those things off, Coach. Top conferences in NCAA Division 2, the lay of the land, the structure, and also how they compare against some of the top flight in D1.
Yeah, I think, when you describe the CCAA, I mean, as we said earlier, it's one of the top, I think it is the top Division 2 conference in the country for female soccer. And I don't think you'll find a lot of coaches that would argue that across the country. You look at, the top, in our region, 8 teams get to go to the national tournament, 5 are from our conference. So, you look at it, top 25, we had 6 teams in there when the season was just finishing up. And it's a testament to, we have the coaches in this conference are unreal. I mean, it's a unique place where, every game brings a distinct challenge, a tactical challenge, where we're fortunate enough to be in a soccer environment where the talent is high and the coaching staffs know what they're doing. So it's a great environment for the student athletes. As far as parity goes, I think, we fought this at St. Ed's a little bit, where we would play some Division 1s, and we play Texas and TCU and big schools like that. Because, in reality, we're not in the same recruiting pool.
Yeah.
We're not recruiting the similar players. So it was nothing for them to lose. So if they tied us or we beat them, or, and the games were close. They're, 1-0, 1-1. Out here, similar. I'm fortunate enough that the schools out here, like Cal State Fullerton, LMU, UCI, UNLV, Cal State Bakersfield, we've been able to every spring provide our student athletes with an experience against Division 1 colleges, and it's mixed. We'll win some, we'll tie some, and there's some that you play someone like USC, or it's just the level is different. And I think there's a ton of parity across all divisions. I think there's some overlap. If you're looking at the top Division 3 schools, top NAIA, top junior colleges, top Division 2, there's some fantastic programs that, soccer is so competitive. The thing I think you need to look at as a prospective student athlete is how much time you want to invest in your soccer. So I think Division 1 is, you're spending around 4 hours a day. I mean, that's a normal day dedicated to soccer. And, Division 2 is a big proponent of Division 2 is life in the balance, where we're able to balance your academics and your athletics. in a way that the environment is still extremely competitive, high-level soccer, but with the balance of being able to do well in your classes and not feel the kind of overwhelming pressure that these top Division Ones can bring. And again, we all know that pressure, that social pressure, administrative pressure, comes from the final point of, like, we have to win games.
Yeah.
And that translates. There's a trickle-down effect in those environments. And I think the really successful programs, and I've spent a lot of time around Baylor and, great friends with the Jobsons and have the utmost respect for what they do in one of the toughest conferences in the country. And it all comes down to making sure that the kids they recruit understand what the demands are within those divisions. And as you go into Division III, and I'm sure you speak to Lance Key about this, the level is very high. The teams at Trinity were fantastic. But the balance was on the back end in the spring, where those student athletes only had a couple weeks together to play soccer, and the rest was focused strictly on academics. It could be, a study abroad program, an internship maybe they wouldn't have been able to take part in if they were playing Division II or Division I, where we're training every single day. So I think that the prospective student athletes just have to understand the time commitment, how it breaks down for each division. And again, there's going to be some differences between programs and how those programs are run. So I don't want to blanket programs. I know in speaking for our program, we train in the morning. We train before classes. We do that for a reason. There are a number of different reasons, but keep them on their degree plans. They get the classes they need to get. And besides keeping them on a sleep pattern and, making sure they start the day the right way. And so every program is questions these prospects need to ask when they are looking at different institutions is, what's the time commitment? What are the expectations of a day as a student athlete playing for your program? Because I think some kids get maybe a little overwhelmed by whether it's facilities, the visits, whatever it might be. The best piece of advice I think I can give is to make sure that they spend time with the players, and just the players, not the players and the coaches. It's great for them to go see a training session, spend time with the entire staff, and then have those players or have those prospects spend time with the players. So, we send our prospects, they go have coffee with a couple of our student athletes so they can ask them the questions maybe they don't feel comfortable asking us. And those kids paint the clearest picture of what it's like to be a student athlete there every day. I mean, we have a perception or an understanding of what we think it is, but we're not in it. We're not going to class. We're not going to practice. We're not going to work after class. So I think that's been the most successful thing for us in making sure that, our program, we've had one player transfer out of our program playing at another school. And, and that happens for a number of reasons, but I think everyone that leaves campus after they meet with us and our players, they got a firm understanding of who we are. And, there's 223 Division II soccer programs in the country, right? There's 1,400 and I think 46 programs, Division I, II, III, NAIA, JUCO. There's a place for every single player.
Everyone.
They just have to do their due diligence, their research, and they have to interact. It can't just be like having a face-to-face right now is it's different, obviously, in our current times, but we want to build relationships with people, and we want them to want to be here. This isn't a sales pitch, right? I'm here to find out if you want to be here after knowing what we're about. That's all I want to know.
Yeah. And I think
easy.
Yeah, I mean, you get off with some really, really key points there. And I always task our kids, and I say, listen, it's all well and good. You talk to Jay now. Jay's interested in you, for example, but invest a bit of time, energy, and effort to potentially even, and we've been doing that quite successfully over the last few years, where we have kids actually travel out, go see the program, go meet the coaches. If you got a chance to go have a kick with the team, as per D2 rules, obviously they can't do it at the D1 level. Have that official visit, like as an international student, and really then make a decision across the 3 or 4 that you've connected with via our network who have key interests and a great offer and opportunity for you, academically and athletically. Make that, obviously it's going to be harder with this whole karate thing over the next 12 months, but I always ask every one of our clients to be able to do that rather than just do the video conferencing, which is fantastic. That's one way. But actually go out and get a vibe before you make a commitment. So it's good that you covered that off. And I think you mentioned something there that really stood out for me, and it's important. You said D1 recruits differently to D2. What are the nuances between both? And because girls and guys typically are like, well, I want to go D1, but here's the rub of it, right? Mm-hmm. I want to go to D2. How's that? What are they going to look for? So what are the nuances between a D1 student athlete compared to a D2 student athlete, and how are they recruited differently amongst D1 and D2? What are those nuances?
I don't think they're recruited differently. I think we all have different challenges in how we recruit. So, if we talk about funding and the availability and admission restrictions, and I'm going to speak to the CSU. I mean, we have a lot of great talent in California, but there's a lot of restrictions for out-of-state players to come into the Cal State system. And those restrictions there's academic restrictions, there's the financial, it's almost double, right, as an in-state player. So there's different challenges for the out-of-state players, and the international players, as I said, we're fortunate enough to have a waiver in place that can help alleviate some of those stressors. But I think every school is a little bit different in how they structure it. So as far as like our ability to go and evaluate players, I'm again speaking for ourselves. We're not funded to recruit outside of California. So we have to fundraise for those. So if I want to go to Phoenix to watch a game, I pay for that out of fundraised money. Wow. So there's just different challenges where I think, I speak to, my good friend Jason Doyak. He's a head coach at UMass. And, and he's flying, like, where are you going this weekend? Oh, I'm flying over here to see a couple games. And it's a different... It's a different way of life as far as the recruiting aspect goes. And I think that translates into how the student athletes perceive it as well. I think some student athletes think we can offer 1 million official visits where we can cover the costs of food and housing for everybody that we'd like to. And that's not necessarily the case. I know for us, we're pretty limited that way. I think Division I, not all Division I's, but the larger, more, Power 5 conferences, like their recruiting it's like professional recruiting. You fly out, you watch a game, you watch a session, you fly home. And I'm sure, Lance Key can attest to this. When he was at University of Texas, he'd fly out, watch a game, and then fly home. And so as far as recruiting a Division I, Division II, Division III student athlete, I don't think it changes. I think it changes in the fact of what we look for in that player. So what are the restrictions that I have at my university? What are the academic restrictions? Is she a California girl? Great. Okay, so financially, this is something that we might be able to do. What are the challenges facing the opportunity for that particular prospective student athlete to come to my university? So we structured a little different. We encourage the unofficial visits to get on campus and watch training. I think Division II has a unique ability where, the players can come and train with our team after their junior year. It's a unique experience that Division I doesn't have, or Division III, where they really get a sense of what the girls are like, how you coach, what the cultural dynamic is within the dressing room. I mean, those moments I think are invaluable when you're making such a large decision with your life. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but...
No, it does. I mean, it covers off so many key points, and I think that a lot of kids just don't understand, and families from the outside in, close to 100% of my time is informing student athletes and their families about, the nuances across different divisions, and just being really brutal up front, honest and raw about it, because a lot of people, don't understand, how a D1 school recruits and what that entails and what the structure and the day in the life of is compared to a D2 or a D3 or, NAIA or whatever it might be, right? So I think you covered off some of those nuances and some of the challenges that you face, in terms of recruiting budgets and D1 schools, like you said, totally different when they got, they're funded on the back end by, big football and basketball programs, and you have that money to be able to recruit quite aggressively, sometimes into the millions of dollars in terms of full scholarships and all that kind of jazz, compared to a D2 that might only have, at best, if they're lucky, maybe $100,000 in their coffers to be able to recruit. And then, you have to be very granular. You have to know, okay, well, this recruiting class, I've lost a goalkeeper, a centre mid, and I need they're my key recruits, and that's where most of the money is going to have to go to, right? And then on top of all the other challenges that you face as a coach as well, right, in terms of, recruiting locally as opposed to internationally, and just making do with what you have and building budgets. A lot of these kids just don't understand it. They just see the coalface, right? So it really is, it is important that you covered that off. I think that kind of ties into scholarship, and I have seen personally that there is a gulf between men's and women's. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more women's programs than there are men's across the landscape collegiately, in terms of college soccer across all division governing bodies. A lot of the men on the men's side, at least a lot of the clients are kind of like, I know for a fact as a freshman coming in roughly around about what they're going to have to fork out of their pocket, but it's a very different story when it comes to women generally. There's a lot more money and there's a lot more scholarship on offer. Can you give me more clarity about that for our viewers in terms of how scholarship kind of works, your end, and what you guys have to play with when it comes to scholarships? So.
Speaking on obviously the women's side, Division I, a fully funded program has 14 scholarships to work with, and for a fully funded Division II is 9.9. And then you look at Division III, where they don't have any athletic scholarships. They work with grants and different kinds of packages, academic packages that they put together for their athletes. And then you look at NAIA. NAIA, I believe, is 12 scholarships, and junior college has up to 18 for a fully funded program. So if you look at somewhere like, let's use, for example, Tyler Junior College, Corey Rose, a great friend of mine, and great program. I don't know how many national championships he's won now, but it's a lot. And, every program is going to be a little different. So I'm just going to use the CCA, for example. I think we're third in the conference in funding, which is fantastic. But I know there's schools like, up north in Humboldt that he has to raise $40,000 to make it go.
Absolutely.
For us, we fundraise around 20 a year. That's my target, to make sure that, our recruiting budget is $2,400. So, for me and my staff, I don't, we really have to be specific of what we're doing with our dollars. And those dollars go to official visits. Those dollars go to the meals. They go to the housing. And it's important for us to obviously do our homework on the players and know where we can take risks with different types of players as well. So, as far as the men's side, I think with Title IX coming in and, the different universities with football programs and the the equality that has to happen, that the NCAA mandates within an athletic department, as far as, I think it's a 4% swing on either side between men and women balance within the department. And now with the pandemic, you're looking at Division I programs that you have to have 16 programs to be Division I, and they're struggling to keep that number. And how that landscape is going to shift as well, because UC San Diego, who is arguably one of the best programs in Division II, they're one of the best in Division III, are now transitioning to Division I. What the challenges are going to be for a school like that.
Massive.
So, yeah, scholarship dollars is a good question, especially for international student athletes to ask. And I always encourage kids to look at NCAA.org has a great list of questions for student athletes. It's kind of a template for them to access, and they look through the questions that are important to them and their situation. Everyone is going to be a little bit different in that regard, but it's an important question to say, is scholarship available? And you wouldn't imagine the amount of emails that I get from student athletes, whether it's the lack of English, but the first thing they're like, I am looking for a full scholarship. That is
always.
It's not a reality. It doesn't happen. The top Power 5 conferences, it happens, but not at all.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I think that a lot of I always tell these kids, look, I'm just going to tell you raw exactly what it is, because ultimately we're going to have a monetary discussion with yourself and your family. But the reality of a full ride scholarship is just it's such a narrow window. And if you're fortunate enough, and we've had, a bunch of our kids get full rides, I always tell these kids, be prepared, because if you're a D1 athlete in a full ride, that's the bullet to your temple.
Absolutely.
You've got to perform. You've got to be a return on investment for that coach who's just spent literally, in some cases, anywhere from 50,000 to 60,000 USD, right, per year on that athlete. Like, you have to be that. I mean, let's put it in perspective. If you look at it from the top athletes in any sporting endeavor, you've got to be the Mike Tyson. You've got to be the Jordan. You've got to be, you've got to be that level of athlete to be able to maintain that and come in and get that, or be asked for that. And not only that, be a great student as well. You've got to be able to maintain that. So, it's good that you did cover off that. We had some amazing questions from some of the viewers.
Okay.
I'll blend these two in. Two questions that came through. One from Margot Chevet, who's one of our clients here in Sydney.
She's going to Nick, isn't she?
She'll be joining a fantastic young player. She asked the question of you, coach, as a freshman, what can a player do to be sure to get playing time? So I think that's one of the questions that we typically get as recruiters, and as yourself as a coach. What can you give in terms of feedback in regard to that?
We tell all of our incoming players, because they do have more responsibility. Incoming players that have never been a part of the program yet have a little more responsibility on themselves in order to be in shape without really knowing what the demands are going to be. So I'm big on first impressions, and I always tell our kids, look, you come in, you're not a freshman. You're just a player on this team fighting for a spot. Whether you've been here 5 minutes or 4 years, you're still fighting for the same spot. So my first impressions are who's respected the team and the program to prepare the best they possibly can to come into preseason ready. I think for me, it's a respect thing. I think, people that are able to intrinsically motivate themselves to do the work on their own, which we all know is extremely hard. Those people tend to kind of rise to the top early. And we all know the college season is super short. And if you come in not prepared, you don't have time to catch up. And more likely happen is you train too hard, you overtrain trying to catch up, and then you injure yourself, and then you don't play.
Yeah.
So my biggest advice would be to make sure your habits are in line with what the demands are going to be when you go to college to play, which are going to be, getting up for class, make sure you're eating right, make sure you're going to bed at the right time, and then making sure you're putting the work in. And that's all you can do. Playing time, you have zero control over that. Yeah. Zero, all you can do is put the effort in, apply the information, work as hard as you possibly can every day, and do it the right way. And then ultimately, it's down to the staff, what the team needs in that moment. Tactically, it could be something different. Injuries happen all the time. So the other thing I would probably tell her is be prepared. If you are not starting, be prepared. Because when that opportunity comes, you want to take it and you never want to give it up. And, I've seen it happen on both sides. I've seen kids grab a spot. We had our center back this year, never played a minute in 3 years. And our center back got hurt. And she ended up playing 1,500 minutes, all conference.
Wow.
And, when I sit with her and she's like, yeah, I wasn't giving that up. I'm like, perfect. That's what I want. So
that's the mentality. Yeah.
Yeah. Preparation is what they can control. Make sure their preparation is locked in. And ask questions when they're not sure. If you're not sure what you're going to be facing, what you should be doing, ask, right? And then the rest of it is completely up to that person and what they want to put into it.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. And I think these kids just don't realise, say, for example, in, the CCAA, just how competitive it is as a conference from top to toe. And that's not even including all the, the 24, 25 plus conferences across NCAA Division 2. There's some really strong conferences. It's no different than if you're going into a top flight nationally ranked program. It's no different than you playing, for example, at an elite level, say for our Australian viewers, the girls, you're playing at W League.
The same.
Or it's the same mentality. Nothing is given, everything is earned. You might be a little bit out of pocket, I always tell our clients, you might be a little bit out of pocket that first year. That shouldn't be a concern. That's a money thing. Really, you got some scholarship, but if you want to earn more of it, and you want to earn more of your keep, you got to prove it on the field, right? So it really is interesting that you say that, because a lot of people don't have the mental integrity for the most part.
That's a good way to put it.
Not integrity. I'd probably say the mental dexterity to be able to cope in an environment that is extremely challenging. You mentioned it. We go back in time. Coach and I have all talked about his experiences in Europe as a young player, and him thinking just like I was as a young player heading over to Europe, saying, I have the ability to beat there, and realising that you still have such a long platform to go. So the unique thing about the 4 years in the collegiate environment is it gives you a platform. It gives you 4 years to prove yourself, just like a player. 3 years of not playing in a nationally ranked competitive program, every single one of the players are competing for a spot, and you've got to prove your worth. And when that opportunity comes, take it, because and never give it up. Work your guts out to continue that momentum, and that is telling of not only how can I say, it's not just telling on the field of competition. It's telling in how that same paradigm, that same mindset transitions in life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
In life, you can work in competitive environments where, you're going to have to really, kind of push yourself and compete, and you keep and to feed your family. And I always tell our kids that there's one more question that came up from Tasha Wayne. Thanks, Tasha, and I think it just ties in, so we'll probably finish off. What are the ways to strengthen your mental side in terms of soccer when it comes to the student athlete? And what are the things that you guys work on with your team to be able to make sure that they're competing at the highest level?
Yeah, I think discipline is something that we have a choice to make a decision, right? When we're talking about being disciplined with your nutrition, your recovery, your mental focus when you come to training, that for me, when they align that, shows me that they're mentally tough, because it's very easy to say, I'm going to take this morning off, I'm going to cruise through this. Something I tell our goalkeepers a lot, our team as well, I want them to push so hard in the things that we're doing, whether it could be a tactical challenge within the exercise that they might be struggling with, but I want them to push themselves so hard that they fail. And they kind of looked at me a little bit. They're like, well, we want to succeed. I said, look, if everything you do, you push yourself, right, to the moment that you fail. You're out here, you push yourself, let's say physically, to the point that, you can't go anymore. You've gotten to that moment. The next time you do it, it's going to be a little bit higher, right? And I want you to get comfortable with the moment of not being successful and being uncomfortable and being vulnerable in front of everybody that you value their opinions of you. But you can see how invested you are because you're putting every piece of yourself into what you're doing. And that's where it's the fear of failing that never allows us to push past a ceiling that we preconceive as where we are, whether that's a mental ceiling, a physical ceiling, and it could be, tactically.
I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to cut off in about 14 seconds. We'll jump back on. We've done like 2 hours of power here, right? So we're covering off one final question from Tasha Wayne. Tasha, thank you so much for that amazing question that you sent through for Coach. And Coach was talking about some of the strategies that he puts in place mentally for his teams to be able to compete at the highest level. So maybe you want to just finish off with that, Coach. With where we left off in terms of some of the strategies that you have in place for the girls. So.
Yeah, we in backtracking a little bit, we ask our girls to push to that point of failure, so they're comfortable. They're comfortable in that moment where we all know in the course of a game, nothing rarely goes right all the time, and their ability to push themselves within an environment that they are being judged in by their peers, by the coaches every single day, but to be able to push past the fear of failing, because that is a fear for people, is looking a certain way or feeling like, wow, I didn't succeed in that moment, and watching how they respond to that moment. And if we think about the moments within soccer and transition, when I recruit players, the biggest piece for me is transition. And what they do and how they react and what their body language is like. And we ask our girls in every moment, I don't care if you fail. I don't. What I care is that I know you didn't extend yourself there, right? And your team starts to recognize within the culture who's really pushing themselves to or through a moment where your team starts to develop this resiliency, towards adversity. And I think, I don't want to give away all of our secrets. We, our team room, we're fortunate enough to fundraise, and we had one of our alumni's fathers helped me build a team room for the team. So now we have a team room for our nutrition, our training stuff. It's fantastic. But one of the things we implemented in the room is besides as far as like the different quotes and our value system that we have within the team, is each player within their locker has a whiteboard. They have their nameplate, and then there's a little whiteboard there. And we ask our girls to articulate and verbalize what they want to achieve. And I want their teammates to see it. And there's a number of ways I can go through this, but, it works on the connection within the team, understanding. So, John, if you and I are working on, you and I got to work on crosses one day. I really want to get better at my crosses. We build relationships within that. The teammates see, oh, she's working on this. Or let's say someone sees, the center forward wants to work on fitness, right? Yeah. Our leadership group kind of oversees making sure that after a session, when you look at that whiteboard, I make them like they can check it, like, yeah, I achieved that today, right? Or that's their focal point. And I think for them, the mental toughness of knowing that their teammates see what they're trying to achieve, they are able to say, yeah, I want to do this today. That accountability builds mental toughness, because the people that you care about, that you're going out into battle with every day, they know what you're expecting out of yourself, and they're going to expect it out of you. And, I think we're fortunate that we have an environment of kids that they want to prove something every single day. And, we center it around what they want to prove. It has nothing really to do with the coaching staff. It's everything, as far as what, we ask them every year, how do you want every other team in the conference to describe you as? What's your identity? And then they have to identify the behaviors and the actions that they have to take each and every day. And that takes discipline, which in my mind is a big component of mental toughness. So I don't know if that answers the question, but...
Well, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of kids just... And look, I'm still a coach today, and I think that a lot of kids just want to play the game, but they don't realise that that's just one part of the puzzle. Realistically, what really forms your success in life in general is being able to come into a structured environment which harnesses a structured mentality and approach in terms of, okay, look, I've got to get up at a certain time. These are the set protocols in terms of my training. I've got to do those things. It almost becomes robotic. I dare say almost second nature at some point. And look, the transition's hard. I could, for a freshman, to be able to look at that and say, okay, hold on a second, I've got structure here. Most kids just want to kick a ball around the park. Most kids don't want to, most kids, just like you, just like me back in the day, will kind of focus only on the football side. But the reality is the collegiate environment is to make sure that you have the balance around study and play. When you start talking about systems, those systems are inherent in every part of life, whether it be, okay, you're a footballer and you want to go play at Manchester United, or you want to go play at Real Madrid. Do you think that you just rock up, kick the ball and go home? I mean, it's your life, right? So I think what happens is, and then that translates as well, I should mention, like in the corporate world, like you want to go work, right? In the best corporate companies on the planet, there are systems and a structure, and that all adheres to, if you apply that, if you live and breathe it, you will be successful. You will earn your keep, you will earn your money. In terms of the student athlete, how that translates is if you stick to the game plan, you will be able to gain, more financial assistance. You are, that's the tail end of that, right? But if you apply that every single day, it really transitions into life in general. Absolutely. You can take these systems and really implement them, and they actually become a phenomenal part of, a phenomenal part of your growth and development as a human being. So I think if you have systems that challenge you, and that's not always the case in the collegiate landscape, right? You're going to have programs that just say, you're going to study, come here, we're going to have a bit of a kick, and we're going to play during the week. Right. I can only imagine. Right. And then, the teams and the coaches and the programs that I look for, that I speak out, just like, driving out, meeting yourself, meeting Nick, meeting all these people and fantastic people right across the US, great great people, great former athletes, great coaches who have implemented amazing environments for growth and development over a 4-year period. So, it's really, really telling that you say that. Like and it's telling of where you guys end up in the conference year upon year. In essence, you're in one of the top women's conferences in the US. Outside of that, you are, you're just consistently, playing at a level that means that anyone who enters into that, into your program has to be able to adapt, work around the system, embrace the system to be able to succeed in the system. So it's really, really interesting that you did cover that off. One very large question, I promise I'll let you go, but this was an interesting one from one of the viewers who basically said, I'll be attending CPP this fall with interest in playing for the women's soccer team. Is there any advice that I can get about the team? I think you know what, I'll leave that in terms of, and I think that was, I'm assuming Young Sage, I think that's your name. You know what I'm going to do? All of this content, this amazing content that we coach is front and center on our live stream. We've just covered over 2 hours of amazing information with none other than Coach Jay Mason, the head coach of nationally ranked Powerhouse women's soccer program, Cal Poly, Pomona. It was just amazing. So much information. What we're going to do is we're going to get the live streams up on our Instagram stories. They're only like 24 hours, so you pretty much got up until 10 a.m. tomorrow to uncover any of the information. Once that is down, it's down for good. You can't access that information anymore. I will be taking the content and putting it onto our membership portal on Patreon. I'll put the link up in the description, and you'll be able to subscribe to that information and be able to connect with more information around all the different coaches that we connect with and uncover all this fantastic information about the college soccer pathway. Coach, I can't thank you enough. So much amazing information uncovered in well over 2 hours, and I can't thank you enough for all your time. So we're going to check out you, Coach. Really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate your time. And it was great sitting from the other side of the pond, but via video chat. And I hope once this all clears over the next, hopefully 6 months, but if it's 6 to 12 months and beyond, that I'm back out in the US and we get to meet each other again and spend some time with each other. Yeah,
it was good. I haven't seen that face in a while. So it was, I was extremely thankful for having just taking the time to sit down and chat a little bit about this. And you're doing a great job there. I think
I appreciate it, man. I really do. One of the reasons why we can do that is that we interact with coaches like yourself, man, and I'm really, really blessed to have you as part of our greater network of phenomenal coaches that we send our kids out to be reviewed by every other day from right across the globe. So really, really interesting, man. Really, really insightful and grateful